At around the age of 3 years old, children enter a stage of their lives that is referred to as heightened imaginative play. They make up wonderfully elaborate fantasies in which they live out with their toys, often dolls or action figurines. In most cases, with dolls in particular, the toys become an integral part of the child's imagination, expression, and socialisation, all of which go on to form the foundations of their being later in their lives. For some adults, the fascination of fantasy can remain present in very healthy ways. Some people use the dolls for inner child healing, companionship, and evoking nostalgic memories of simpler times, comfort and escape. Some people repair and restore the dolls as a hobby, creative outlet or financial gain, whilst others simply collect them. Today's subject had a fascination with dolls, in an entirely different manner. 45-year-old Mr Anatoly Moskvin, regarded as a genius in languages and history, held a macabre secret beneath the veneer of his seemingly ordinary, slightly isolated life. He also had developed intimate, expert-level knowledge on funerals and cemeteries across his country. And, on a cold November day in 2011, police made the chilling discovery of the mummified remains of 26 young girls in his apartment, all meticulously dressed and lined up as life-size dolls. Thus was born the name, the Human Dollmaker.
Hello and welcome to I Could Murder a Podcast. We're back once again with a brand new case, and this one is going to get some people feeling a little bit eerie. How you doing, Ben?
Doing really well. Just had a stretch, and I feel like a little shudder occurred as you were saying how creepy this case was. A little stretchy shudder.
Do you want to check your pants?
Very happy to be here. One that I'm excited to go through with you boys. How are we doing, Producer Dan?
Very good, thank you. I've got my coffee in my nice mug here that you can buy on ICMAP. I didn't mean to sell so early on in the episode. Sorry about that. But
you can buy a Simpsons mug instead online.
Or a poster.
There you go. Whoa, damn.
Yeah.
That looks fresh.
Yeah. I'll get a frame.
Get a little Gizmo few keys.
That's cool, actually.
Fez. Out now.
Carnage.
Bit dusty. Dusty old Fez.
Bit racially.
No, it's not. It's a gift.
That doesn't cover you for everything. It's a gift. It's a gift. The burning cross, they put it in my garden. It's a gift. Oh. Anyway, yeah, this case...
I had something to add to that, actually, if I may.
Oh.
Was in a part of Yorkshire last week, went into an antique shop. All the way, it never ended. The more you went into this building, the more the building continued. And right at the back, glass cabinet, loads of Nazi stuff. Felt a bit sick being that close to it. And a German owner. So...
What do you think of that, Dan?
Why are you asking me?
Just because you had to pull a face then.
I didn't pull a face.
Yeah.
My face.
Play the replay, Bons.
And there's no doubt there.
Yeah, well, that sounds interesting, Ben.
Loads of papers. And it just said, on a medal that had a swastika on it, it just said, German War Medal.
Part of history, though, isn't it?
I know, but I just felt, I'm rubbing my legs now. I'm like, I feel,
Turned on.
No. I felt very, just turned my stomach. Just very much.
So why did you buy so much? But this case, it is one that I feel like I keep saying this is one that I didn't know much about at all. Ben, what was your cryptic clue for last week?
It was, you could give this crown to Brendan Fraser or High Priest Imhotep. The Mummy, both sort of prominent characters in the Mummy. I did reference it was the nickname of this case, the Mummy King. So that was this week's one.
The famous boxing promoter's mother. Don King.
Mummy King.
I'm sure a lot of people would have got it if they known the 90s or early noughties film The Mummy. I'm sure that they would have figured it out.
Shout out Corey Johnson, who was in The Mummy. What a ledge.
Can you do a voiceover?
It was the best Mummy film, and then it went downhill.
Has he done the voice for us?
He was one of the pew pew guys on the boat.
But yes, this case, it feels like, whilst in the research for this case, I had to double check multiple times when this took place, because this does feel like one of our cases which was way, 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 way back. I'm going to say Gain-Gine kind of era. But no, this is one that the perpetrator is still alive today. It's a very dark, eerie one. Obviously, from you can tell from Dan's intro, it's a particularly gruesome one, but yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I was shocked by the relative recency of this case. I was exactly the same as you. I thought it'd be sort of early 1900s, and no, it wasn't that long ago, which is terrifying. And it's very much a case, classic true crime, as Tom said at the start of the series. Just one that gets worse and worse as it progresses, and yeah, just
like that shop.
Like that shop, very much like the antique store. Yeah. The further back you go, that's where the darker stuff is. But yeah, with Anatoly, he probably had his favourite, from what I understand about him, probably had his favourite things out front. He had the less favourite things in the back, but you know. But yes, very much like the antique store. And yeah, this case is a winding road of macabre and disturbing things.
Lovely. So Ben, can you announce what today's case is?
Of course I can. There's a lot this week. It is the case of Anatoly Moskvin, also referred to as the Mummy King, the Human Dollmaker, the House of Children's Corpses, the Lord of the Mummies, the Russian Dollman, Anatoly Moskvin and the Dollhouse of Corpses, the Perfumer, and the Man who turned graves into dolls. There's probably a few more out there that I've missed, but that was what I was able to collate for us, and I still went overboard.
The Man who turned graves into dolls. I mean, that's just grammatically terrible, and also he didn't do that. So that's a terrible one. But yeah, I'm sure people are starting to put two and two together. What this case is kind of centered around. His origin story, in terms of the event that may have led him down this path, is one of absolute nightmares. Very Tim Burton-esque. But yes, this one is going to be a particularly fascinating one to delve into with you guys.
I agree with absolutely all of that.
Let's delve.
November 2nd, 2011. After a tip-off from counter-terrorism officials, as well as a chance encounter at a graveyard, 8 police officers enter Anatoly Moskvin's cluttered apartment, armed with a search warrant, following a series of grave desecrations that have unnerved the entire city of Nizhny Novgorod. They suspect him of planning some sort of attack against Muslims. However, as they navigate through stacks of thousands of books and miscellaneous items, they uncover a scene of quite literal horror. Meticulously dressed, life-sized dolls that are in fact the mummified remains of 26 young girls. The pungent smell of decay and preservation chemicals fills the air, whilst Anatoly Moskvin stands calmly amidst the chaos, offering no resistance as officers arrest him. His eerie collection lingers in the background, revealing the true depths of his disturbing obsession. The investigators, obviously horrified by their discovery, begin to piece together the chilling details of his grave-robbing activities, unravelling a case that will shock the world for years to come. The timid 45-year-old individual arrested by the police was described by all of those that knew him as an eclectic, lonely genius who still lived with his parents. He was held in high regard amongst the academic world and had spent much of his life working as a lecturer, a writer, and a researcher. So where exactly did things change so drastically in the life of Anatoly Moskvin for him to now be referred to as the Human Dollmaker?
Anatoly Yuryevich Moskvin was born on the 1st of September 1966 in the ancient city formerly known as Gorky in Soviet Russia, now known as Nizhny Novgorod, which roughly translates to Lower Newton. It's the 5th largest city in Russia.
And the Gorky part, just for those that were interested, because I thought Gorky sounded quite sweet, it was when the city was for a period named after famous Russian writer and political activist Maxim Gorky. So the more you know.
Ben Carter's
More you knowsies.
Substantive facts.
It also works as well.
Anatoly was the only child born to Elvira and Yuri Moskvin. His father Yuri was a respected journalist, whilst his mother Elvira worked as a secretary and a bookkeeper. From a very early age, Anatoly was described by many of those closest to him as wise beyond his years. Despite being an only child, he still had some friends close to his family's home, and was extremely close with his parents and extended family. His father, Yuri, described him as a quiet, gentle, intelligent, and socially awkward little boy who was immediately passionate about learning. Despite this, his parents provided well for him and used any opportunity they could to try and help socialise their son. Because of these efforts, he is said to have started his childhood happily.
At around the age of 8 years old, things slowly started to change. Anatoly, who had been a very shy and reserved boy to this point, showed the first signs of personality and behavioural changes. He would regularly come home from school and shout at his parents. He would get into a rage and break things in the family apartment, and would also start to vanish from the apartment for long periods of time during the weekends. His parents remained sympathetic and often let his son get away with misbehaviours, whilst it is believed that he would use the time away from the family apartment to start exploring and hiding in local graveyards. I mean, I remember being a kid, graveyards are always interesting, weren't they? Like, even just reading just like the dates and names on there, not doing anything else in there, just reading it.
Just reading.
I mean, and yeah, getting a bit moody and mardy with parents, that's fairly normal. So far, no red flags from me.
None, apart from Russia.
And still a joke that I did in Series 1.
No.
Or Series 2, whichever one was.
Series 2. Not that I remember.
At school, Anatoly was often top of his classes and excelled in almost every subject, though he sometimes struggled to speak to other people and also found it difficult to make any new friends. His parents overlooked this because they felt he was, quote, too mature to relate with other children.
A bit like me. Now. Obviously now. Fuck's sake.
Too busy
Done myself.
Too busy licking.
Done myself.
The other day on the Minnesota, Ben was saying how he gets off on the smell of freshly cut grass at the local park.
Nope, just said freshly cut grass. Didn't specify where.
He said it's the children's play park.
Definitely, it's getting worse.
I'm not the nonce anymore. Yeah.
I don't know.
Hey.
He would regularly take books from school and his father's collection back at the apartment and look to share his passion for reading with other children in class. When this wasn't received too warmly, he instead started taking them to explore local cemeteries and graveyards with him. On his fascination with graveyards, Anatoly recalled,
When we were boys, we used to go for walks to the cemetery where I live. Crash near Etna is not far from here. We collected bottles, lit fires, it was fun. Since then, I've been drawn there like a magnet. I've been used to hanging around cemeteries since the 7th grade, and it seems to me that no one in the city knew them all better than me.
In 1974, shortly before Anatoly turned 9 years old, a pivotal moment occurred that would change the trajectory of his life forever. On a cold winter's afternoon, Anatoly was walking home from school. Almost everything about this day was typical. The time that he left, the fact that he was walking home by himself as he always did, and the route that he took. One notable exception was a strange-looking man who appeared to be waiting not far from a wooded area close to Anatoly's home. As Anatoly attempted to pass the stranger without catching his attention, the man quickly called him over, pointing to something on the floor by the entrance of the woods. As Anatoly approached, the man grabbed him, ran into the woods, and proceeded to rape the 8-year-old boy. Anatoly would not discuss this incident for another 42 years. From this moment onwards, Anatoly became increasingly withdrawn, increasingly depressed, and increasingly scared of the world. He would no longer wish to hold the once extremely close relationship that he had with his parents, and any time they tried to comfort or console him, he replied with anger and aggression. His parents backed off as a result, and Anatoly became more alone than ever before. Their relationship would remain this way for some 50 years later. So yeah, I mean, Tom mentioned there's two kind of really big traumatic events that take place in his childhood that potentially would go on to influence his later behaviours. This is not the one.
Yeah, that wasn't a Tim Burton-esque
Yeah,
one.
sorry, this is
just to clarify, that wasn't
the Tim Burton one is this one.
5 years later, when Anatoly was 13, another hugely influential and hugely traumatic incident took place. Once again, as he was making his way home from school, Anatoly this time noticed a large group of men in black suits standing on a street corner that he was approaching. The group of men were all staring at the boy, and they stopped him before he was able to pass them. The group were on their way to attend a funeral of an 11-year-old girl by the name of Natasha Petrova, who had sadly passed away as the result of an accidental electrocution.
So yeah, there are kind of two different stories here. Number one is that once again he was walking home from school when this occurred. The other one is that his school were doing basically a competition regarding recycling, and the more recycling they could collect and return to school as part of this project, the more they would be rewarded. As a result, Anatoly really was quite competitive and really took to this, so he went further out of town to parts of town he'd never been to before, and this is where he stumbled upon a cult-like scene, everyone dressed in black surrounding this very small little coffin, and he was freaking out at this point.
The men dragged Anatoly over to our open coffin, where they bizarrely then forced the boy to kiss the face of the corpse several times. The deceased girl's grieving mother then placed an apple as well as 2 brass rings in Anatoly's hand. One ring was put on the girl's finger, and one was placed on his. Anatoly recalled these traumatic events some 32 years later, when he published an article in Necrologies, which was a weekly publication dedicated to cemeteries and obituaries, of which Anatoly would become a regular contributor. He wrote, "An adult pushed my face down on the waxy forehead of the girl in an embroidered cap, and there was nothing I could do but kiss her as ordered. I kissed her once, then again, then again. My strange marriage with Natasha Petrova was useful."
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the word useful and why this was useful in his life, but a very bizarre series of events. This was the one, obviously, Tom was referencing as very Tim Burton-esque. The mother, apparently, who was in a deep state of grieving, gave him a box of fruit, some money, and said, basically, for the next 40 days, you can't tell anyone about what's just happened. I don't know specifically why the 40 days, but that was the remit. And he was... This entire time he didn't want to kiss her, he just wanted to go, and this is kind of his first encounter with, I guess, the opposite sex, but also his first intimate encounter, and it's with a dead person.
Yeah, I think 40 days is always quite, it's always a number of days. Like, is it Lent? 40 days?
40 days, 40 nights.
I just had a quick Google. On the 40th day, the ascension of the deceased soul occurs.
Ooh. Well, there you go. So I think, basically throughout that time, he didn't tell anybody, obviously very disturbed by what happened. And he would regularly in his dreams be visited by Natasha throughout this time. She basically would say, if you go back to where we met, the town, I won't visit you in your dreams anymore. And she basically, he would regularly see her and be visited by her. And it's very it's basically the Corpse Bride kind of Tim Burton film, but also it's very different. But I just quickly checked to see if this actually influenced it, but it wasn't this. But it's particularly eerie. We don't know exactly what this ceremony was thought to do. Perhaps, maybe in some cultures it's maybe passing away and not being in wedlock is looked down upon or something like that. But I don't really understand why this had to happen. Yeah, deeply disturbing. And he was very adamant he didn't want to kiss her. They kept trying to force him, and then also just tried to bribe him with things. And he kind of realised he wasn't going to get out of there unless he did this. So you can understand why from this point onwards he's got a fascination or an intrigue at least with the dead, and particularly with the young dead.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. And obviously he's 13 years old. He's been assaulted and raped by a strange man by the woods. He's now gone through this and been forced to kiss the corpse of a young girl. He doesn't have anyone to talk to, no way of processing this. He's not very close with his family, and he decides to keep all of this information to himself. Starts suffering from a series of nightmares when Natasha visits him, and it's just, from here, there's not a great deal that seems to happen other than these two incidents that would then form what he later does in life. So I think, these are the two key moments that have really, really influenced his decision-making.
So as Ben mentioned, we're going to go into a little bit more now why Anatoly said the word useful about this experience. So by useful, Anatoly was referring to this incident sparking his belief in magic ceremonies, essentially funerals, as well as his obsession with corpses and death. So over the weeks that followed, as we mentioned with the nightmares he was having, Natasha apparently convinced him to learn black magic in order to save other souls of young girls from their graves. These beliefs and curious obsessions eventually became a completely consuming fascination, one of which he would harbour and develop over the next 30 years, eventually acting on them in the most shocking and twisted ways. So the interesting thing about this case is he's doing it from a place of thinking that he's actually helping the people. He's not doing the next actions because he's getting a huge sense of, from what I gather, sexual gratification. It's more he's doing this to help people save their souls.
Yeah, and this is the really jarring element. Well, there's a lot of jarring elements of this case, but he's a genius. He's not an idiot. He is perhaps even thinking that when he goes on to now study black magic, the occult, different cultures, burial processes, and afterlife beliefs, he's really thoroughly doing his work here, doing his homework on these things. And that for me is where I think he's maybe even thinking that he's smarter than everyone else, so he can actually bring people back to life and save these souls. I actually think he genuinely believes he can do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's far away from a case we've done before, Carl Tanzer, who is more just a crazy scientist.
Dirty old man.
Yeah, very dirty old man. So for the remainder of his childhood, as well as his early adult years, Anatoly never dated or got married and never had sex. In fact, he could barely hold a conversation with those of the opposite sex. He never smoked, took drugs or drank any alcohol. He remained living at the apartment with his parents throughout all of his life. And any previous elements of social life had completely dwindled as a result of his new fascinations. During these years, he continued to explore different graveyards and cemeteries, not only the ones local to him, but ones all over the country. He taught himself 13 different languages and also earned himself an advanced degree from Moscow State University, specializing in linguistics, history, and Celtic studies.
He taught himself 13 different languages, so I wasn't messing about when I called him a genius. It's not my standard of genius. He's an actual everyone standard of genius.
What's your standard?
I don't know. I think people might think it's slightly lower.
Jamie Oliver.
But here you go. Let's just do a little genius test. So he was obviously someone that could speak a lot of languages. So Tom and Dan, you're smart guys. A person that's a little pop quiz for you. A person that speaks many languages. Are they a speakophile, a polyglot, a langoria, or a multiloquial?
I'm going for multiloquial.
Oh, nice.
Yes. But maybe I should just be different.
Ooh.
But I'm gonna go with multi, that one.
You've both fallen into Ben Carter's pop quiz chat trap. Chat trap. Yeah, it's actually a polyglot, which surprised me. The other ones were made up words by me.
Oh.
Polyglot apparently. Yeah, I was looking at like Latin words for speak and write and learn, just blended them all together. But yeah, he was a polyglot, amongst other things, which we'll get onto.
I thought it'd be something lingual, would be like bilingual and whatnot.
Speakophile. No one went for that.
No one went for that one.
Does that mean anything? Multiloquial.
Well, I hope not.
I'm sure it.
I think it's not a word.
Definitely recognise it.
Thanks, man.
I do trust you, Ben, but a multilingual person is generally referred to as a polyglot. Oh, so multilingual is a thing.
It's a company.
Oh, what do they do? Trains. Locomotive.
It's the world's leading digital advertising curation service. There you go.
Multilingual is polyglot, but multilingual is also another word for it.
So from his studies, as Tom mentioned, Anatoly had a keen interest in Celtic history and folklore, with a great deal of its mythology often blurring the lines between the dead and the living. From here, he formed an increasingly deep obsession with death, the occult, burial rituals, and cemeteries, building a collection of more than 60,000 books and documents that he kept in his parents' apartment, which I'm sure they were really happy about. It was already a small apartment from what you can see. But yeah, 60,000 plus.
That's a lot of books, Ben.
That is a lot of books, yeah. He became very well known amongst the academic community despite living such a sheltered life, with a great number of his peers describing him as an eccentric genius. After graduating, Anatoly started working at the Institute of Foreign Languages, where he published a series of books, papers, and translations, once again, all of which were very well known and highly regarded in academic circles. He also started occasional work as a journalist and regularly, as Dan mentioned, contributed to necrologies. His interest in graveyards, death, and magic ceremonies led him to refer to himself as a necropolist. So he's a polyglot and a necropolist, describing himself as an expert when it came to local cemeteries. In 2005, when Anatoly was 39, he was commissioned by necrologies to investigate and list all of the dead people in more than 700 cemeteries across the country. So basically, a lot of the graveyards had either decayed over time or they had been impacted by the war, and so there wasn't a public record of all the dead. So he obviously had a keen interest. It wasn't great money to do this. Obviously, it was a fairly small publication that were commissioning him, but obviously it was his passion. And he was like, an excuse to go to all these, 700 cemeteries. Yeah, I'd do that for free, probably.
Yeah, that's literally, I imagine, his dream job being thrown at him. Yeah.
So he's just got to go there, literally visit every single grave, list who they were, when they passed, what their name was, how they passed, if that's on there, and return to the mag.
I calculated that in 2.5 summers, I personally inspected 752 cemeteries. I finished processing the field materials, and in addition to them, I reprinted 900 different poetic epitaphs collected throughout the region. Isn't that folklore? Believe me, it was very difficult to personally crawl through 35 districts. While I'm still young and have the strength to crawl through the gullies, I have to hurry.
So as he did not drive, Anatoly decided to visit more of these cemeteries across the country on foot, occasionally getting the bus. Most days during these 2 summers, he would walk 18.6 miles per day, so he was very particular in doing that exact number. He would drink water from puddles on the roads, consume very little food rations that he took with him, and he would spend his nights sleeping on haystacks, not the wrestler, in bus stops, in abandoned buildings, in the cemeteries themselves, as well as once sleeping in an empty coffin that was being prepared for a funeral. He described the latter two as part of his research, sleeping in a coffin as part of research.
I swear we've had that before, haven't we? Where someone was working in a mortuary and was like, I'm just going to have a little try.
Yes, I do remember that.
But, I did think funerals, pretty interesting.
Sad.
Interesting, sad as well. Oh, play it.
Play the jingle. Ben Carter's Interesting Facts.
Welcome back. What a series it's been so far. Today we have something a little bit different for you. I'd like to introduce you to Ben Carter's strange and special little send-offs. Here we're discussing some of the more outlandish ways that some people have decided to go out, perhaps making their burials a little more bearable, or putting the fun in their funeral, which I think is Kids in Glass Houses lyric, Tom.
Yeah, I think it might be, yeah.
So what I've done, boys, basically I've got 3 strange funerals for you. I wasn't going to...
Why didn't you pick 4?
Because I've got some other things as well. I wasn't going to include the Hunter S. Thompson one where he got shot up in a cannon because I thought that's quite a well-known one. So I've gone for some sort of niche funeral elements here. And then I've also got 3 special little send-offs. So funerals and then different ways to go, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, we'll start with number 1, Mr. Lionel Batiste, who was a New Orleans jazz drummer who sadly passed away in 2012. As Lionel didn't want people looking down on him and his coffin, he decided to be embalmed and presented at his funeral standing up on stage in a white suit, leaning against a lamppost that had been brought indoors, holding his signature cane with his other hand. He was wearing a hat that had been described as being tipped rakishly to one side, complete with his favourite pair of sunglasses. Next, we have Mr. Fred Bohr, the inventor of Pringles. He always wanted to be buried in a Pringles can. That wasn't obviously wasn't going to fit. So instead, when he was cremated in 2008, parts of his ashes were buried in a Pringles can. He was so proud of his work, which I would be too if I invented Pringles. To be fair, that's pretty big, isn't it?
Once you pop.
Yeah,
that's true. Because Pringles are quite dusty, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's crisp. So no, that's kind of that thought's a bit made me feel slightly uneasy.
Well, the dustier crisp, the Dorito, Mr. Arch West, inventor, he wanted to do a similar thing, but instead of being put in a bag of Doritos, he asked his guests to scatter Doritos over his casket before he was buried.
Did you start on a certain trajectory with this and then you suddenly went down a crisp?
Yeah, well, I just thought I can't mention Pringles without Doritos, the 2 favourite party crisps.
I would prefer if his coffin just got dipped into big salsa.
That is, maybe we could do that with me.
That'd have to be a big crane. Just in general, for
Oh, God. And then finally, we have a slightly different one, Mr. Tupac Shakur. So for a long time, there were rumours that members of the Outlaws smoked Tupac's ashes after his funeral. Everyone said it was, that's just a funny story going around. But in 2011, the story was confirmed by group members who claimed to have done the following. And I just wondered if producer Dan, as I've got a direct quote, you could sort of chime in here for me.
Yeah, sure, man.
In that voice as well would be brilliant.
We had a little memorial for him with his mum and his family. We hit the beach, threw in a lot of shitty light to the beach, some weed, some chicken wings. He loved orange soda.
Who loves orange soda?
Tupac.
Is it true?
Pac loved that kind of shit, so we were giving him our own farewell. If you listen to Black Jesus, he said, "Last wishes, smoke my ashes." That was a request he had. Now, how serious was he about it? We took it serious.
But yeah, apparently his ashes were smoked by some of the homies.
I remember, I can't remember what band it was, but notoriously snorted his dad's ashes.
Oh.
One of the Rolling Stones claimed to do that. I think that was disproved.
Yeah.
Well, I think this case in particular is a walking advert for being cremated.
I agree. I mean, I have then got 3 different things that you could do if you don't fancy being cremated or sort of, buried traditionally. I've got some cool ones. I think number 1 is kind of my worst nightmare, but it's quite cute.
Your worst nightmare, but quite cute.
It's cute in that it does some positive things, but also the picture of it just terrified me.
Can I guess?
You can, yes.
For that one, is it something about planting a tree?
No, but that is out there. There's some parts of the Philippines where you get planted in an open, a hollowed out tree.
Can you imagine burying you just with your buns out and just putting a little seed on it?
Okay. Well, we can talk about that.
Okay.
So what I've done, those are 3 kind of weird ways, and I threw in little Doritos guy as well, so there's 4. These are things you could do. If you want to try something a little bit different for your special day, then how about this? Number 1, become a memorial reef in the ocean. So this is the picture that terrified me because it's just a man at the bottom of the ocean. Oh. But a company in the US called Eternal Reefs compresses your remains into a sphere or a reef ball that is attached to a reef in the ocean, providing a habitat for sea life, and it probably leads to some quite curious fish.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, the picture is, it just scared me.
Oh, that just looks like that's from a shit book. If they're saying this crushes you into a spherical object, that's not that.
It's a little glowing spherical object inside the human. Perhaps where the heart might be.
Yeah, I don't think that's what...
But yeah, you could become part of a coral reef, which is quite sweet.
I don't mind I quite like the idea of going back to the land.
Yes.
It's nice.
Yeah.
But not that. That picture's just not real in terms of what you're talking about.
Scared me a bit.
Yeah, but...
Okay, so going back to land then, Tom, how about this one? Number 2, the Zoroastrian vulture funeral. So just as the name suggests, a send-off by a committee, wake or kettle of vultures. Your corpse is washed with bull urine, after which it is visited by a holy dog, or a sagdik, as it's referred to in India and Iran. It is then placed atop a tower of silence where it is swiftly devoured by 24 vultures. And these vultures, they seem to be getting pretty well fed, as they are among some of the largest vultures in the world. It's a very similar ceremony called a Tibetan sky burial, which I just thought, maybe you get tied to a bird and fly away, but that wouldn't be practical.
Tied to a bird.
Sort of fly off into sky.
Just tie Ben to a penguin. But yeah, I mean, getting covered in bull piss and then eaten by vultures does not...
That's not a way to go.
Yeah, that's not the way I would choose. I mean, I obviously respect anyone that decides to do that and any culture that does, but not
So
for
should
me.
we pop you in the reef instead?
Is that the only two options?
I'll give you a third one. Finally,
Okay.
And this one is, this one would be more up Anatoly Moskvin's street, perhaps. Famidihana, the turning of the bones. So this entry is coming from the wonderful island of Madagascar. Once every 7 years, the Malagasy people of Madagascar exhume the bodies of their loved ones, wrap them up in cloth, and dance with the corpse sacks. It is believed that the corpse is likely to smell pretty bad each time they exhume them, so they spray it with wine and tell the corpse stories of their families, often introducing them to babies and small children that they never got to meet. And then they turn the bones, they place them back in a slightly different position as how they found them, just to get them a bit more comfy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do like cultures where they kind of make death not as sad.
Celebration.
Celebrate it.
Mexico
celebrate
do the
it.
Day of the Dead, don't they? Or is it, what's this festival of the dead?
Yeah, they don't, I think.
Perfect.
But I think I like that kind of culture around death rather than it being just really sad and it's like they're still with us and talk to them and things like that. I think that's really nice. But yeah, none of them for me. But thank you for
Not the
sharing.
Pringles or the Doritos or...
No, I didn't have anything to do with either of those companies. Maybe I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. Straight away.
Well, that Lionel Batiste, the embalmed jazz drummer, like he was one. Like apparently, embalming is becoming the new sort of, I don't know, the new iPad. But yeah, there's some people that have been embalmed in boxing rings, trucks, ambulances. Like there was a paramedic that was, he drove ambulances all of his life, and he got embalmed and placed in an ambulance. I don't think they were buried in the ambulance because that would again be a lot of embalmings happening these days.
Costly.
Very costly. Yeah. Very costly.
Yeah, but they wouldn't embalm the ambulance, they would just embalm him, so it doesn't really matter where they put
Yeah,
him.
that's true. But hey, thanks for having me. Back to the doll man.
As he did not want to waste time whilst walking, he would continue to read and write during his journeys by holding books or journals out in front of him whilst he walked. He also wrote 2 documentation series of his walks titled What the Dead Said and Great Walks Around Cemeteries, which sound like both fascinating reads.
Yeah.
What the Dead Said.
What the dead said. Dip, 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 dip.
Maybe a little bit of a review on that by Right Said Fred. Right said Fred, talk about what the dead said. Anytime he was not on these journeys, he would return to his family apartment, where he would head to his room and escape into the solace of any of his thousands of books. So at this point, he still lived with his parents into his 40s, but remained on very reserved terms with them.
I was constantly busy with the cemeteries, so much so that my legs fell off from walking. But I managed to read more than usual. You walk along country roads, hold the book in front of you, a bag over your shoulder, and no one sees you, and read even till dark. Your feet walk on the ground, and your eyes walk along the lines. During these 3 years, I casually wrote another book about Islam, and I'm finishing work on a toponymic dictionary.
Just casually, okay.
Ben, what's a toponymic dictionary?
Yes, please.
Oh, gosh.
Toponymic.
Toponymic means something comes from the name of a place. For example, the word badminton is toponymic because it refers to Badminton House in Gloucestershire, England.
Wow.
Damn, that is interesting.
So it's possibly like the game rugby.
Wow.
Yes.
Bath?
Or Mountain Mowbray pies.
Stilton.
He's Stilton.
He's doing that very, I casually wrote a book, another book about Islam, and casually finished off my toponymic dictionary. The other thing I thought as well is he's reading, day and night whilst he walks, sometimes walking, in the darkness. He's definitely, if some of the things that happened in his childhood had happened to me, I would be terrified of being on my own and in the dark. So I thought, again, that's a sign for me that maybe this trauma, these highly traumatic experiences have maybe not necessarily given him too much fear, but instead, I don't know, I think especially as Tom said, the Tim Burton-esque one that we talked about is making him fascinated, curious and passionate about these types of things. But yeah, I would be terrified about, I wouldn't have my eyes in a book, I would be looking out for people.
I think he's kind of self-appointed himself on this mission, hasn't he? And I think he kind of thinks those things that happened, specifically the marriage to the dead girl, as being part of his kind of quest. And yeah, I mean, he's a very well-read guy, well-studied guy. His peers all respected him and thought he was incredibly intelligent and very incredibly good at what he does. So yeah, he's just very introverted, isn't he? So he's a very curious man. So apart from him sleeping in the coffin, at this stage where we're at now, he hasn't done anything that's crossed the line.
Yeah, I would agree. Nothing too concerning.
I don't know what his angle on Islam was in that book, so maybe that was crossed the line. But
well, that's true.
During these travels, a series of grave robbings were occurring in different parts of the country, gradually rising in volume. As a result, police began investigating the situation in search of vandals or thieves, and it was not irregular for Anatoly to be stopped by police during his travels, or whilst he was studying within the cemeteries. Despite spending a great deal of time with him, they never detained or arrested Anatoly because they viewed him as a quirky academic, after he showed them his credentials and started explaining the work he was doing. But Anatoly had become far more involved in his work than he was initially tasked with, and certain unbelievable discoveries would result in his work never seeing the light of day. And it is here that we move to the timeline of the Human Dollmaker, Anatoly Moskvin.
2005. Shortly after Anatoly Moskvin turned 39, there are rumours that, due to a heightened sense of isolation and loneliness, he had started to pay visits to numerous adoption agencies all over central Russia. Each time he applied to adopt a child, he was swiftly denied. This was predominantly down to the fact he would have been a single parent, did not earn enough money, and planned to raise the child in a household he shared with his own parents, but also because he was allegedly incredibly insistent that the child must be female and below the age of 6.
Don't feel comfortable.
As a result of these rejections, twinned with his fascination for all things dead, Anatoly decides to embark on a slightly less conventional solution to his loneliness.
I'm glad that they are doing some due diligence, thinking he's creepy. Where did you sleep last night? In a coffin? Nah. Next.
How are you going to feed the child? Puddles, predominantly puddles.
Puddles, some rations.
Puddles and scraps. Yeah, don't like that.
At around the same time, 8 grave sites appeared to have been disturbed in cemeteries within a 5-mile radius of the Moskvin family apartment. There are signs of empty caskets, whilst others appear to have been freshly dug despite being years old. All 8 of the graves belonged to young girls who had sadly passed away before they reached their teenage years. Anatoly, as we have mentioned, preferred to conduct his affairs on foot, so it isn't entirely clear on how he is able to get away with the following without at least one person witnessing it.
Carl Tanzler had a big wagon, if I
He
recall.
did, which would also draw attention. Big, loud old wagon. But
Yeah, but you could put other things on top of the wagon. Like you put, I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you had a big wagon and you put a body in, you could put things on top of it to make it look like you're just carrying. But if it was me, lots of soap just to disguise the smell. Ben,
yeah, good idea. I was going to say,
just been to Lush. You know, you can eat anything from Lush because it's actually natural ingredients. See you later.
have you seen in the riots recently that was it Lush or Body Shop got looted and someone was just running out with some man in like a St. George polo shirt was just carrying out 2 like bags of bath bombs. It's terrible, isn't it?
Maybe he thought that they were actually deadly.
Maybe.
If they throw them as well, if you throw them at a police officer, the riot shield's just going to have that for supper.
So just imagine him in prison afterwards. And how do you get in? Bombs. Oh,
Just carving an apple, going. You wouldn't believe my story if I told you. What was it? I still bath bombs. lots of bath bombs. Jesus Christ!
yeah. But stop looting and stop rioting, please.
Yeah, please do. Well, when this goes out, I'm hoping that it would have ceased by now.
Oh, it might have got worse though. We'll look like idiots. I'll look like an idiot.
Yeah, they're probably attacking IKEA by now. Meatballs.
Anatoly began sneaking into graveyards and cemeteries at night with a shovel concealed in his clothing. This is where he would then spend hours digging into the graves of young girls. From here, he would remove the corpses, many of which ranged in different stages of decomposition, before placing them into a sack and carrying them back to numerous different hidden and dry locations. So immediately I thought he just took them straight home, and sometimes obviously he's within a 5-mile radius of his home, which is, a fair distance to walk. But no, instead he knows he's got like secret locations nearby the graveyards on each site, wherein I guess they see a bit of sunlight, and he can leave them there to dry before returning and collecting them and then taking them home.
It's kind of like when you buy potatoes. You should leave them in a cool, dry place. Different.
Exactly like that.
Yeah, but it's similar.
I guess, yeah. Actually, yeah.
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah.
So what he would do is wait for the corpses to dry sufficiently enough before taking them back to his parents' apartment.
Where he'd cover them with beans and cheese.
The eerie part about this disturbing, well, it's all disturbing, but he did this, he dried them out because he didn't want to, when he carried them back, leave any kind of various trace fluids or trace flakes behind him. So he's thought about it.
Yeah, he's a very smart man, Ben. But still, I don't like the word flakes.
No.
There. I mean, surely though, if it's outside, fluids and flakes, they're going to be washed and blown away. And but yeah, I get it. I would have thought, if anything, it's to help with the. I haven't thought about this much, but I would have thought it was to help with the fact that if it was firmer, the body easier to carry and move and. Malleable, is that the word?
Yeah.
Okay, malleable, yeah. More malleable. But I've not had experience doing this.
A metal or other material able to be hammered and pressed into shape without breaking it. Yeah.
Maybe not quite that. But yeah, I'm not imagining he's making them into a funky position. It's like the jazz drummer.
Yeah.
It's the YMCA.
Mm-mm. So from here, it gets incredibly dark. After exhuming the corpses and once in the safety of his bedroom, he soaked the bodies in salt and baking soda before researching mummification techniques in an attempt to preserve the bodies. You would have thought he would have probably researched it before that point. Ultimately, he decided that the bodies would be best placed in the form of self-built human dolls, so as to give them a vessel for when he was able to learn how to resurrect them. And he did this predominantly because he felt they wouldn't want to be in their decayed and ugly physical remains. They were his words. The dolls were predominantly made out of metal wire, cloth, paper mache and glue, which was mixed up and placed around the corpses. He even drilled holes through their eye sockets, fitting them with buttons, with the hopes that they could then watch cartoons together. Which I'm sure didn't Carl Tanzler do a similar thing with the eye? He did something with the eye sockets, didn't he? Not that, but something.
Yeah, the eyes, very eerie. I mean, as I said, obviously what he's doing here is absolutely horrific, but he's doing it with the intention to resurrect. There seems to be no sexual gratification from doing it. Fascinating someone who's so intelligent and obviously so, well-read and, a genius, as Ben said earlier. But this delusion that sits with him as well. It's fascinating.
As Anatoly realised that he was unable to prevent the bodies from withering and shrinking as they dried, he decided to wrap all available limbs in strips of cloth and stuff the various body cavities with rags, old bits of paper, and padding to provide fullness.
Rags. Oh, that's grim though.
He sometimes even added wax masks decorated with nail polish over the faces, before finally placing them into brightly coloured children's clothes and wigs that he was able to obtain from various charity shops. This resulted in the overall appearance of a homemade or vintage, life-size child dolls, which gradually improve in quality over time. He would occasionally change the dead children's clothes, dressing them in stockings, girls' clothing, and knee-length boots to make them look like dolls, and even applying lipstick and makeup to their faces, and putting music boxes inside their rib cages.
Yeah, that's one to not just gloss over. I don't really know the relevance of the music boxes, because it's obviously know what the music boxes are for, but it's because then when the police would found these dolls, they moved them and they would make certain little music would come out of them when they're being moved.
I think that was it. So whenever he wanted to obviously pick them up, move them, touch them, whatever he was doing, he wanted to have something make a noise back towards him, and his solution to this was music boxes. Yeah,
that's a whole nother level of creepy.
Yeah, it really is. Depends what music is playing though.
Does it?
What song would you have in your body?
If I got this happened to me and I was the body, maybe like, all aboard. Is that the
Crazy Train?
Yeah.
But music box version or
that
like
one.
Little Bluetooth speaker. Iron Man.
I don't know what else the other ones had, but yeah, probably that one. To be fair, what about you?
I have a horrible feeling because obviously some of the dolls we'll get into it because there's video footage of this we'll share later. But he had favourites, and he had ones that he didn't like so much, so he just chucked them in the garage. And I just think I would probably have been one of the ones. Imagine that you're dead, and then your grave gets dug up, and then you're not good enough to be in the room, so you get thrown in the garage. That would probably be me. But if I could have a tune,
lonely, I got nobody. That's great.
Cream. Anyone for tennis?
yeah. What about that tiptoes through the little guy?
Just
go ultra creepy with me. Yeah. Oh, imagine hearing that coming from
That
your
is
garage.
incredible.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah, I'll
Christ.
have that then in the garage.
Would you be smiling?
Probably not.
Manic smile.
The highly educated, academic turned body snatcher even marked the birthday of each of his dead victims on a calendar in his bedroom. During the latter part of 2005, Anatoly's aging parents did not appear to be concerned by the growing number of dolls appearing in various rooms of their apartment, nor their son's erratic behaviours, and certainly did not expect the dolls to be concealing actual human bodies. Anatoly's mother, Elvira, recalled the following: "We saw these dolls, but we did not suspect they were dead bodies inside. We thought it was his hobby to make such big dolls and did not see anything wrong with it."
The smell. Would be one of the things. And also, you would, if your son's still living there, in his 40s, suddenly loads of human dolls around the house, creepy music boxes inside, you go, I thought it was fine. It's just a little hobby. No.
He's happy.
No, I mean, he even got to the stage where he would bring some of them to the table, didn't he? Like when they were eating, and
Yeah.
just think that was fine. Introduce him to certain family members. But yeah,
I think as well, because he told his parents his dream was to become a parent, and he had told them he had been to adoption agencies and been rejected. They also didn't approve of the idea of him adopting by himself or anything like that, but I'm sure they obviously wouldn't have approved of this either. At this point, well, no, not quite, but it kind of reminds me of that movie, Lars and the Real Girl, the Ryan Gosling, because that's quite a sweet movie, but this is not sweet,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great film. Yeah. But yeah, no, this is a lot creepy. I mean, like, the thing is with the adoption thing as well, if your parents go, "You going to move out?" Is that another mouth to feed? At least we don't have to feed these dolls. But yeah, very, very eerie. In 2006, over the course of the year, Anatoly grew more confident in his actions and abilities. He is estimated to have exhumed the graves of between 10 to 16 young girls and women, aged between 3 and 29 years old, all of which were within a 10-mile radius of his family home. Amongst the clutter of the apartment, which was filled with a mixture of books, magazines, children's clothes, and now almost 24 life-size human dolls sitting on different shelves and furniture, Anatoly continued to spiral into a world of his own fantasy, though he would later claim there was no sexual motive whatsoever when it came to his doll collection, and would remain adamant that they were his family. Anatoly would eat his meals with his dolls, he would watch television with the dolls, and he would read books to the dolls. As Ben mentioned earlier on, he also had a collection of slightly less favourable dolls, which he simply placed in his parents' garage to keep out of his sight. During this year, police are actively investigating numerous reports of grave robberies and grave vandalisms. Many of these reports were made by the parents of the many victims of Anatoly Moskvin, who apparently only chose specific victims' graves if their spirits spoke to him and gave him express consent to retrieve them. Which, again, is like, I do think in his head he's doing this out of respect, and it's all like above board, and you know he's providing a service in a way. But yeah, the families were made to relive the trauma and agony of losing their daughters when it was revealed to them that their corpses had been since snatched. One such grave that he dug up belonged to 10-year-old Olga Chardimova, who was tragically and brutally murdered by a drug addict when she walked from her parents' house towards her grandmother's home. The killer murdered her simply to steal her earrings in order to fund his drug habit. Olga had been murdered in such a violent way, and her body was subsequently hidden for 5 months, which meant that only a portion of her badly decomposed remains could be buried in the coffin. Despite this, it did not deter Anatoly, who filled in her grave once he had taken what he wanted from it, leaving the parents to continue visiting an empty grave for the following 6 years. Olga's mother, Natalia, would recall the following.
We buried her on the 2nd of October 2002. I could never imagine that almost exactly 10 years later, on the 5th of October 2012, I would open her grave with the police and find her remains had vanished. Her coffin was empty, with a hole at the top from which she had pulled her remains. You can't begin to imagine it, that somebody would touch the grave of your child, the most holy place in this world for you. We had been visiting the grave of our child for 9 years, and we had no idea it was empty. Instead, she was a doll in this beast's apartment.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It is a case where it's quite easy to sort of not make light of the situation, but it is just such an outlandish series of events that it's hard to feel real. But these are the real victims of this case, and imagine the poor parents or family members of these victims whose graves have been vandalized or had the remains, retrieved from. It must cause, it forced the parents to relive that trauma, but also, it just caused them a lot of distress. I mean, we were talking before we started about there's some flowers on my nana's grave that keep getting moved to a grave next to it, and that annoys me. But that's just a little set of flowers. This is I just think we shouldn't forget the victims in this case, because it's disgusting what they had to go through because of this guy. Who, again, as Tom said, thinks I've got consent from the spirit. It's a consensual act, and I'm doing them a favor. But it's so weird. 2007. This is believed to have been the most cautious year of Anatoly Moskvin's bizarre and disturbing criminal exploits. Only 5 reports of grave robberies or disturbances were reported in the area this year, though more than 180 were reported across the country. Anatoly continued to research the occult and black magic, heavily exploring the themes of resurrection. It is believed that he may have tried to conduct seances from his bedroom, whilst also making animal sacrifices in an attempt to bring the dead girls back to life. He said that he felt deep sympathy for the girls and believed that his education and research had left him with the skills to not only communicate with the dead, but to also be able to bring them back to life. So as Tom said, he thinks he's on a mission here. He thinks he's actually serving a purpose, and he's going to be smart enough, intelligent enough to bring these girls back to life. And it's, he's very much lost in his own fantasy at this point. So Anatoly continues to focus on the graves of female children between the age of 3 and 12 years old, specifically targeting recently buried bodies that would be easier to preserve. He refined his mummifying process and now has the mummified bodies of between 15 and 21 women and young girls placed in and around various rooms of his parents' small apartment. He begins to add personal touches to each doll, including name tags, family histories, and accessories, and he regularly refers to the mummies as his dolls and his friends whenever his parents ask about them, which again, would that not give some concern?
Him calling them friends and family, I think that's not. He's already had them in there for so long. I think, And him not being able to adopt, they might just think that this is his coping mechanism.
Just that smell. Old books and
Yes.
old... Occasionally, he would even ask his parents to attend his favourite doll's birthday parties.
That'd be a hard one to get out of. I think every single one. There's so many of them, you can't be busy. It's just a big shop. And it's a lot of big shops. Do you think that's to buy presents for him as well?
Well, he didn't have much money, did he? He'd probably make something for them.
No, parents.
Oh, yeah, probably have to, don't you?
Did you buy them a present, Mum? He's doing all the jewellery and eating all the cake afterwards.
2008 to 2010. During this 3-year period, reports of at least 22 other grave robberies are made to the police within a 10-mile radius of Anatoly's parents' home, though it's estimated that hundreds more occurred across the country. Many of these graves belonged to young Muslim girls. Russian police, as well as a team of investigators, including the Russian Interior Ministry, believed wholeheartedly that these grave vandalisms and robberies were being conducted by large extremist groups, that they had no idea that it was the work of one lone, highly disturbed individual. A total of 26 human dolls now sit in varying conditions in his parents' small family home, with one set of remains even being placed into the fur lining of a teddy bear.
Yeah, there are documented photos of all of the dolls, but there is one of the teddy bear as well, and it's just, yeah. Reminds me, Tom, do you remember we did that Hello Kitty case?
Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of that.
Shortly after the 2011 Domodedovo airport terrorist attack in Moscow, police received a tip-off that, potentially, someone was desecrating the graves of Muslims as a means of retaliation. Upon heading to the graveyard in Nizhny Novgorod, police find Anatoly Moskvin painting over the graves of dead Muslim girls. He is immediately arrested, and police obtain a warrant to search his parents' home. What they found next was far beyond any of their possible comprehension.
Firstly, at the entrance of the home, a pair of boots belonging to Anatoly were found. These matched the exact same boot prints left behind at the series of grave robberies that had occurred in the area. Investigators found a collection of 26 human-sized dolls, which were initially reported as 29, some of which he had kept for almost 10 years. When police picked up or moved one of the bodies, it started playing music, as if on cue. As we mentioned earlier, inside of the chest of each of the girls, he had put in personalised music boxes so they could produce sounds whenever they were touched. Police found that most of the dolls were wearing the clothes that the girls had been buried in. There were also personal belongings and clothing inside some of the mummies. One mummy had a piece of her own gravestone with her name scrawled on inside her body, which is deeply disturbing. Another one contained a hospital tag with the date and the cause of the girl's death. A dried human heart was found inside another body, which was revealed to have been exhumed 272 miles away in Moscow, meaning that it would have taken him 188 hours to walk to and from the location, or he brought the corpse back on a 7-hour bus journey. As well as this, investigators found a series of metal nameplates that had been removed from the gravestones. They found a collection of grave maps detailing a number of cemeteries in the area. They found a step-by-step set of instructions detailing how to make the dolls. They also found a collection of video footage and photographs taken of the graves before and after they had been disturbed. Anatoly is taken in for questioning, whilst police begin to document the crime scene and inform his parents of what had been occurring.
So for the audio people, we're playing the video of this now. It's obviously police footage walking through the apartment, and you can obviously see various dolls as they make their way through different rooms, and it just doesn't feel real. The fact that the police then are looking at this, initially I think they're just thinking it's dolls, and then they move it and it makes a little musical sound, and then they're realizing they're putting two and two together with all the other evidence they found. I read that none of this could necessarily prove that he had done it, but I'm surely that's enough that it was him.
I mean, I've heard of cases being hard to prove because there was no body, and this is literally 27 in his house. Unless he's saying someone's done it and then left him the dolls as a present and he had no idea, which he's got books of how to make the dolls.
Step-by-step instructions.
Yeah.
Loads of paper mache.
I don't see how, I would have been very surprised if he would have managed to get his way out of this.
So during the initial interrogation, Anatoly confesses to the grave robberies and explains his methods and motivations. He claims he wanted to preserve the girls' spirits and believed he could bring them back to life when the technology became available, or that he could keep them in a state of living. He was initially charged with the desecration of graves and dead bodies, which carried a maximum sentence of 5 years. However, after undergoing psychiatric evaluation, he is diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia as well as potential borderline personality disorder. As such, he is deemed not fit to stand trial. On the 25th of May 2012, 6 months after he was first arrested, he was sentenced to coercive medical measures as a result of his 44 confirmed grave desecrations and placed in a secure psychiatric clinic as a result. He has remained there for the last 12 years at the time of recording, though various appeals, medical treatment extensions, and subsequent trials have coincided with this time frame. In one of these trials, Anatoly heard all of the grieving family members' statements made about their experiences, and this is really just to show how far in he was and how deluded he was at this point. He would angrily respond to their testimonies by boldly claiming, "You abandoned your girls in the cold, and I brought them home and warmed them up."
Again, obviously, if he's believing what he's saying, it's like you can see why he's obviously so deluded in this fantasy or in this world that he's believing that that's what he's saving them from that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's very, it just shows how far in he was.
Absolutely. The most recent update that we could find is that 4 years ago in 2020, he petitioned for release. However, an additional psychiatric evaluation deemed that it was too early to release him, and he still remained a danger to himself and the general public. He is currently 58 years old at the time of recording. So one other thing I did find, which I thought surely this has got to be a joke, was a petition, an online petition on moveon.org, which has been set up by a lady named Gretchen Tender. She launched the petition and states the following.
Anatoly Moskvin is being unjustly imprisoned in a psychiatric ward for showing a great deal of tender, loving care to dead children. Please help free him from this injustice.
Yeah, I mean, it's addressed to Donald Trump.
What's your postcode, Ben?
Sorry?
What's your postcode?
Oh, I'm okay, thank you. Donald Trump, the United States House of Representatives, the United States Senate, Governor Brian Kemp, the Georgia State Senate, and the Georgia State House. So maybe this Gretchen Tender is connected to Georgia in some way. But yeah, just very bizarre. It's got 15 signatures.
16 now, boy.
He's remembered my old Hotmail. Bloody hell.
Just know you're fucking zip.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I'd have an issue if he was in prison, but I think in a psychiatric unit and being treated for that. I think, as I said, I don't think he's doing this with any intention to harm and to elicit pain to any of the families. Obviously, him being diagnosed with schizophrenia and whatnot, there's clear reasons why he's in this delusion. So I think, in my head, it wouldn't make sense him being in prison for it, but him being in the right place to be treated for these conditions.
Yeah, I had a horrible feeling, because I did obviously the research chronologically. I had a horrible feeling I was going to read that he'd been released very early when I saw that initially it was a 5-year sentence that he got. Dan and I just did a quick look, just out of curiosity, what sort of sentence you'd get in the UK for this type of thing, and it's quite vague. It obviously says it's a criminal offence. You can't do it without consent from the Church of England or the Secretary of State. You have to have a license to do it. And apparently the licenses were put in place as a fact that people believed during the Industrial Revolution, the expansion of cities were basically causing graves to be just built over, and that they believe in the idea of that graves should remain undisturbed forever. And that's a point as well, because lots of religions believe in that. So he's going, there was no element of religion in this case. It was all about his belief in different cultures and the black magic and the occult.
Well, even the fact that when the police came to his door, it was believed he was a danger to the Muslim population. So it wasn't anything to do with grave robbing, grave digging, any of exactly what he was going up to. And so it's lucky the police followed it up when they did, this lead, and it led to them to far more than they could ever have comprehended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bizarre case. It's a very bizarre case. It's we haven't been in Russia for a while, have we? We did, what was his name? The zombie guy. Chikatilo, yeah.
So a bit of aftermath and motive here. So on the writings that Anatoly occurred during his initial 2-year commission from the publication of Necrologies, the editor Alexei Yassin claimed that the papers were given to him. However, he said that he refused to publish them after learning of what Anatoly had been doing. He stated in retrospect, and in light of recent developments, that the literature is now unique and priceless, which is...
Sounds like he's trying to incite a bidding war.
Exactly. It's not like, it doesn't sound as if he's going, I'm not doing this out of respect to the victims. Like, no, this is no priceless, and I'm not just going to give it to you. He said, many of his articles enlighten his central interest in deceased young women, which I took for romantic and somewhat childish fantasies the talented writer emphasised.
So he's just viewing it as, just a little bit harmless. He's just a bit of a fool. He's eccentric, but he's not doing anything other than that.
Yeah, very peculiar.
So in interviews with police as well as psychiatrists in terms of looking for a possible motive, Anatoly stated that a great deal of activities were formed as a result of his experiences as a child, twinned with his academic research. He was already an expert on Celtic culture and had heavily researched Siberian cultures as well, both of whom slept on the graves of their dead in order to communicate with them. He said that he started sleeping on the graves of children in the late 90s and early 2000s, during which time some spirits began talking to him and giving him instructions of how to preserve their souls and bring them back to life. This is where it gets quite... This is just a very bad excuse. He said that he had dug up graves for approximately 20 years, but never without the express consent of the spirit. He claimed that he started bringing bodies to his parents' home as it had become too painful to sleep directly on the graves, because as he got older, he developed a bad back.
Yeah. Apparently it's good for your back to lay
Flat
on.
surface, yeah. He also claimed that adverse weather conditions left him with no choice but to bring them home. He hoped the spirits would be more willing to speak in a safe, welcoming home, and that they might be easier to hear when they were no longer underground.
I mean, looking at the video of his home, it does not look nice and welcoming.
No, cozy is
It's
not...
a fucking shithole, isn't it?
Yeah. Keep me in the ground, please. What I will do, I've been adding some bits to the Facebook group. I found, as part of our research for this, a fairly recent interview he did for a website, and it was 6 months before he was arrested, and you can just click translate and it puts it into English for you. Basically, during this interview, it's a very long interview, but it's very eye-opening. He claimed to have been heavily motivated by his own desire to have children, specifically a daughter, which, as we mentioned, was an avenue that looked to have little opportunity for him. And interestingly, he claimed to be aware that he was committing a crime, but felt that the dead children were calling out to be rescued, and believed that by rescuing the children, it was more important than obeying the law.
Yeah, as I said, like, that's the thing with this case. It's obviously a very sad and disturbing case, and yeah, some of the scenes are absolutely horrific, but it's one of those where I do believe, obviously, his delusions were made him feel he was doing the right thing, and yeah, very interesting one. And just quickly, guys, I know I did a segment and disappeared with the segment 1 week, but I'm back.
Nonsense. Very interesting people.
Oh, VIPs. Yes, it is time for Noz's Very Interesting People. And this week, I'm going with Nikolai Polikov, also known as Coco the Clown. He was born in 1900 in Latvia, but hear me out. During that time, Latvia was part of the Russian Empire, so we're going to say that counts. When he was 8 years old, he ran away 300 miles to Belarusia, which is now Belarus, in order to join the circus. He basically spun the yarn a bit, said he was an orphan, had nowhere else to go, and the circus owner took pity on him and said, you know what, come on in. And eventually he found his feet under the tutelage of the clowns. He had a very distinctive look when he decided to be a clown. He had an elaborate costume with large ruffled collar and oversized shoes, size 58.
Bloody hell.
And now his style is very much what influenced a lot of the ongoing style now in clowns. It was his kind of like his ideas, which now kind of echo throughout the clowns following years. I did do some chat GPT to help me with some of the research for this. I said, can you tell me some amusing stories and antics of Coco the Clown? And did they let me down a little bit? So basically, one of the things he used to do was the water bucket gag, Dan, where he'd go up to unsuspecting victims of the audience, pretending to throw water over them, but often it was filled with confetti. And then he would cover them in confetti. And they loved it. Because it was harmless. And there was the invisible dog. He'd walk around pretending he'd have a dog and, make children believe he did have a dog. The last one of these amusing antics he used to do was the hiccup cure, where he'd pretend to have this really bad hiccups, he couldn't get rid of it, and everyone would try and do these remedies, stamping on his feet, making him drink a concoction of weird ingredients. But finally someone would cure him just by scaring him. and everyone found it hilarious. So I think back then this was very cutting edge stuff, less entertaining now. But anyway, this one's quite an interesting one. On April 1957, during a performance at Chelmsford, Nikolai was knocked over and injured by a vehicle driven by Cam, the only motoring elephant in the world. Dash Cam. Yeah. So he received an OBE in 1963, and he would go on to die in 1974 in Peterborough Hospital.
Wow.
So yeah, started there and he came very close to
home.
Where we are. Yeah. But his legacy lives on. He's remembered as one of the greatest clowns of the 20th century. He was able to make people laugh during some very difficult times during numerous wars. So Coco, we salute you.
Coco the clown.
Well done, Coco.
Brilliant,
Very
Tom.
good.
Thank you.
Very good.
No worries. And back to whatever we were doing.
Invisible. You've got me thinking about now that person that I think they just carried a lead with them, but it was just their thing, and there was no animal.
It was invisible dogs. Usually,
exactly. Yeah. Yes. Just a dried lead that stays stiff, then, isn't it? And it helps with the illusion.
But that was this week's case. And Ben, are you going to give us a little cheeky cryptic clue about next week? Next week's case.
I can indeed.
Benjamin Carter's cryptic clues. Everyone gather round for some clues that can be quite cryptic, but he's going to give them to you anyway. Hope you can figure them out.
I will preface this by saying the three of us are very excited for this particular episode. This week's cryptic clue. I don't want that planet in my footlong. I don't want that planet in my footlong. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm sure a lot of people will get it. I could have simplified it a bit more.
But yes, thank you for joining us for this week's case, and we'll be back next week with a brand new case. But if you guys are sitting around going, I want some more from these lads, you can go over to Apple Podcasts and search I Could Murder a Minisode, where there's over 170 cases over in there for Minisodes, $2.99 a month or $29.99 a year. Or go over to our website, icmap.co.uk, where you can access all the episodes over on there, including the visual aspect of it as well. And you get certain discounts, and you can look up some merch as well.
And if you head over there now and use the code LETMEIN in all capital letters, you get 60% off the Cult of It map.
60, Dan.
So come on in.
That seems
60% off. It's actually mad.
high.
I should probably change that quickly.
Yeah, we've covered some very interesting cases over there recently. The death of Dimebag Darrell, the Dylan Redwine case, the Mary Vincent girl who survived case, many more. And they're all available in video and audio form.
Okay, my little glowworms, so thank you for joining us, and be sure to tuck yourselves in tonight and have a good night's sleep. And maybe consider cremation. But like we always say...
We say this all the time.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, unless there's a few obvious ones, really, isn't there? But don't be going digging up graves.
You'll be going digging up all grave, boy.
And stay on the route of your recycling competition. Don't cheat and go out of town, because then you're helping another town. I mean, recycle.
Be careful as well. Be careful if you're walking and reading, because you could easily walk into traffic, and that'd be horrible. And I'm going to leave a little question on Spotify for you guys. If you could have a music box inserted into your ribcage, what tune would it be playing? And on that note, see you later. Take care of yourself. 2-Pip.